Hello, my name is Virginie Magnat, and I am very honored to have been invited by my colleague and friend Floyd Favel to participate in the 2020 Poundmaker Performance Festival. I am going to share with you selected excerpts from my new monograph, The Performative Power of Vocality, published this year by Routledge. And I wanted to show you this beautiful painting by Daphne Ojig titled Powwow Singers. In response to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action addressed to researchers and educators, I seek to open in this book a dialogical space inclusive and respectful of Indigenous ontologies, epistemologies, and methodologies. I draw from and build on the work of Vine Deloria Jr., Gregory Kahete, Linda Tuiwai-Smith, Sean Wilson, Margaret Kovach, Manulani Aluli Meyer, Jill Carter, Dylan Robinson, and Darlene Manning, among other Indigenous scholars. I also discuss my research on the vocal music tradition of my cultural ancestors, as I've been relearning to sing traditional songs in the Occitan language from southern France. In the second chapter, entitled Reclaiming Presence for the Lived Voice, I enter in dialogue with some of my intellectual ancestors, including influential actor, director, and writer Antonin Artaud, who actively contributed to the Surrealist movement. Artaud was deeply invested in practice and driven by the urge to emancipate performance and vocality from the dominance of speech and text. He anticipated what theater might achieve once freed from the stifling constraints of psychological realism, which became dominant in Europe during his lifetime. In his seminal book entitled Le théâtre et son double, The Theater and Its Double, Artaud provocatively challenges Western conceptions of theater. Inspired by the Balinese performance traditions he discovered at the 1931 Exposition Coloniale in Paris, he strategically privileges in his writing the carnal and plastic aspects of physicality and the sonic and phonic materiality of vocality over the discursive function of language. Renewing my relationship with Artaud's writings on performance has become my way of bearing witness to the enduring vibratory presence of this resounding voice, which has provoked, baffled, irritated, challenged, and inspired so many to assent and dissent, claim and disown, critique and emulate its resonant and stridently polemical poetics. For me, the hermeneutic labor of rereading Artaud in French and conveying my interpretation through the process of translating his thinking into English is also a way of engaging with him about the alchemical theater he conjured up as an antidote to the unconditional endorsement of Cartesian rationalism by French culture and its excessive reverence for the canonical dramatic literature of text-based theater. Artaud testified in his work to the chronic suffering he experienced due to severe physical and mental ill health, and it is tempting to pathologize his visionary work by searching for symptoms of psychosis, schizophrenia, and paranoia in his writing, including in his famous vision of actors burnt at the stake and signaling through the flames, as if performance constituted a dangerous way of knowing, forever threatened by suspicions of esotericism and heresy wielded by superstitious inquisitors. However, far from advocating brutality, Artaud's theater of cruelty was concerned with the absolute energies of life, and he explains in a letter to the writer Jean Paulhan, included in Le Théâtre et son double, that although he employs the term cruauté, cruelty, he might as well say vie, life, or nécessité, necessity, to express what he means. Parce que je veux indiquer surtout que pour moi le théâtre est acte et émanation perpétuelle, qu'il n'y a en lui rien de figé, que je l'assimile à un acte vrai, donc vivant, donc magique. Because I want to point out first and foremost that for me, theater is action and perpetual emanation, that there is nothing fixed in it, and that I associate it with an act which is real, hence alive, hence magical. In Le Théâtre et son double, Artaud asserts that alchemical performance operates through the convergence of prodigious and conflicting affective forces, a tumultuous process that he describes as une sorte de rebrassement essentiel débordant de conséquences et surchargé de spiritualité. A reshuffling of elemental forces teeming with consequences and overflowing with spirituality. He cautions that alchemical theater cannot be achieved by purely human means, and that it should not be analyzed through an abusive form of logic whose intellectualism schematizes the arts, but must instead be apprehended poetically through forms, sounds, music, and volumes that induce intense states of acuity, d'un tranchant si absolu que l'on sent à travers les tremblements de la musique et de la forme les menaces souterraines d'un chaos aussi décisif que dangereux. Of such absolute sharpness that one senses in the tremors of music and forms the subterranean menace of a type of chaos that is as decisive as it is dangerous. In Artaud alchemical theater, everything must be buzzing with signification. This material agitation, structured by silence, rhythm, and vibration, is composed of objects and gestures réellement faits et réellement utilisés, genuinely created and genuinely used, and words that acquire their incantatory meaning through their materiality, leur forme, leur émanation sensible, their shape, their tangible emanations. Artaud emphasizes that these are ancient techniques that combine the intensity of color, light, and sound, and rely on the vibrations, repetitions, and tremors of musical rhythm and spoken words through tonal modulation and dissonance. He stresses that the performer must believe in une matérialité fluide de l'âme, a flowing materiality of the soul, and become aware that since passion is matter, the former is informed by the fluctuations of the plasticity of matter, an awareness that substantially extends the performer's agency, to which Artaud refers as a form of sovereignty, endowing the performer with the type of mastery pertaining to a true healer. He also links breathing with spontaneity and life when stating, j'insiste sur le mot spontané, car le souffle rallume la vie, il l'embrase dans sa substance. I emphasize the word spontaneous because breathing reignites life. It sets its substance ablaze. And he specifies that a deliberate way of breathing can bring about the spontaneous reoccurrence of life, asserting that breath is intimately connected to the notion of sacred theater. He associates breathing with affect and infers that all emotions have organic foundation and that it is through a process of embodied self-cultivation, akin to Zeami's teachings about Japanese no theater, that performers can recharge the voltaic density of their emotions. He seeks inspiration for his alchemical theater from Asian performance traditions, whose transmission processes across thousands of years have preserved ancient secrets about physicality, intonation, and harmony, secrets that are linked to the sensory and other modes of perception, and whose vibratory consequences he associates with the intense poetry of nature and the magical relations in which these traditions participate. Artaud's quest for a sacred space that would intensify presence to the point of sacralizing all forms of life was expressed through his desire to experience ritual practices. When he traveled to Mexico in 1936, Artaud sought to encounter holders of traditional knowledge in the hope of participating in the peyote ceremonial practice by the Tarahumara people, an indigenous community living in the state of Chihuahua and whose Raramuri language belongs to the Uto-Atseken linguistic family, one of the largest in the Americas in terms of numbers of speakers and languages, as well as geographic extension. In his performative writing, Artaud evokes the ceremonial process he claims to have witnessed and participated in during his visit with the Raramuri community. He employs vivid imagery, conveying in evocative detail the agential role of music, song, and sound as affective forces whose sonic and phonic materiality seems linked to that of natural elements and appears to be neither merely reducible to its mediation by human sensory perception, nor necessarily confined to human understandings of reality. In the text entitled La danse du peyote, the peyote dance, for instance, Artaud evokes the intensely affective sonorous dimension of this process, culminating in a multisensory epiphany about the material efficacy of ritual practice. Couché en bas, pour que tombe sur moi le rite, pour que le feu, les chants, les cris, la danse et la nuit même, comme une voûte animée, humaine, tournent vivante au-dessus de moi. Il y avait donc cette voûte roulante, cet agencement matériel de cris, d'accents, de pas, de chants, mais par-dessus tout, cette impression qui revenait que derrière tout cela et au-delà se dissimulait encore autre chose, le principal. Lying down at the bottom, to let the right fall over me, to let the fire, the chants, the calls, the dancing and the night itself, like an animated vault, human, alive, revolve above me. So there was this spinning vault, this material arrangement of calls, accents, footsteps, chants, but above all, there was a lingering sense that concealed behind all this and beyond it lay something even other, that which is foremost. In an article entitled Surreal or Unreal, Antonin Artaud in the Sierra Tarahumara of Mexico, published in the Journal of Surrealism in the Americas in 2014, anthropologist Lars Krutak questions the validity of Artaud's writings about his involvement in this ritual process. Krutak maintains, however, that Artaud did visit the Raramuri, as this is confirmed by the testimony of a living witness, namely Elder Erasmo Palma, whom he describes as the renowned 80-year-old Raramuri troubadour and poet who received a Lifetime Achievement Award from former Mexican President Vicente Fox, and who told Krutak that he had met Artaud when he was 8 years old. The anthropologist reports that Don Erasmo explained, "When he came, I was a boy. We showed him a place over there," he points to the northeast of his rancho, "where there is a rock art site near a cave called Piedra Pintada. In Raramuri it is called Reba Weami, signed or marked rock. He said the truth was there, but now you can't see it very well. I made a song about him." The sharing of this sacred site with Artaud seems to indicate that he was treated as a guest in need of healing, given the significance of caves and other natural features in relation to indigenous cosmology and self-knowledge, as specified by another Raramuri elder cited by Krutak. There are places that have great strength for one that knows how to understand and feel. There are places of unique power that comes out of the earth. It can be a place apart, somewhere in the fields, in the mountains, surrounded by rocks or boulders, at the entrance to a cave, at the high summit or at the rim of a canyon. If you stay there in silence for a very long time without sleeping, best is through the night, you might feel like new, ready to face and do many things you couldn't do before. In his article, Krutak includes a photo of pictographs that he took at the site which he visited with Don Erasmo's son, Carlos Palma. And he observes in a footnote that many of the drawings that Artaud created in his notebooks when he was institutionalized at the end of his life seem to parallel the anthropoid figures, spoked wheels, and skeletal beings that comprise the rock art site of Rei Baweyami. Don Erasmo was referring to this period of Artaud's life when he told Krutak. Nobody liked him and they thought he was crazy. They gave him shock therapy. Before he died, he put his shoes on to come to Mexico to cure himself with the peyote. But he died. He died carrying a mystery to the tomb. He died dreaming of these Tarahumara brothers and the Tarahumara Sierra. He wanted to make known what he lived and experienced in the Sierra, but his countrymen didn't believe the truth. This truth is perhaps what Artaud attempts to convey in Le Rite du Peyote chez les Tarahumara, the Tarahumara's peyote ritual, when he shares a testimony about the beneficial effects of a peyote-induced vision he experienced under the guidance of an elder, and which might also be what he is invoking in Pour en finir avec le jugement de Dieu, to have done with the judgment of God, when admonishing mankind for having forgotten what it feels like to make oneself a body without organs, a delirious inversion that entails dancing in reverse by turning oneself inside out. Je dis, reversez de l'autre côté des choses, et comme si une force terrible vous avait donné d'être restitué à ce qui existe de l'autre côté. On ne sent plus le corps que l'on vient de quitter et qui vous assurait dans ses limites. En revanche, on se sent beaucoup plus heureux d'appartenir à l'illimité, à l'infini, et qu'on va le voir. Et ces signes étaient balayés en tous sens dans l'espace, pendant qu'il me parut que j'y montais, mais pas tout seul, aidé par une force insolite, mais beaucoup plus libre que lorsque sur la terre j'étais seul. Cela m'a inspiré sur l'action psychique du peyote un certain nombre de réflexions. Le peyote ramène le moi à ses sources variées. Sorti d'un état de vision pareil, on ne peut plus, comme avant, confondre le mensonge avec la vérité. On a vu d'où l'on vient et qui l'on est, et on ne doute plus de ce que l'on est. Il n'est plus d'émotion ni d'influence extérieure qui puisse vous en détourner. By reversed, I mean on the reverse side of things, as if a tremendous force had granted you the right to be returned to that which exists on the other side. You no longer feel the body that you have just left behind and that kept you secured within its limits, but you nevertheless feel much happier about belonging to the unlimited, the infinite, and about being poised to see it. And these signs were swept through space in all directions, as I felt that I was rising into the air, but not by my own means, supported by a peculiar force, yet feeling much freer than when I was alone on the earth. This has inspired me a number of reflections about peyote's psychic effects. Peyote restores the self to its various sources. Once one has experienced this type of vision, it is no longer possible to confuse falsehood with the truth. One has seen where one comes from and who one is, and one no longer doubts what one is. No emotion or exterior influence can turn you away from such an awareness. In the final pages of this text, Artaud poignantly contrasts the beneficial medicinal properties of peyote with the violence of the electroshock treatment administered to him against his will during his forced internment in a psychiatric ward. Assez, assez et assez avec ce traumatisme de punition. Chaque application de l'électrochoc m'a plongé dans une terreur qui durait parfois plusieurs heures, sans parvenir à me reconnaître, sachant parfaitement que j'étais quelque part, mais le diable sait où, et comme si j'étais mort. Nous sommes loin avec tout ça de la guérison par le peyote. Enough, enough, enough already with this punishing trauma. With each electroshock treatment, I was thrust into terror for up to several hours, unable to recognize myself, fully aware that I was somewhere, but only the devil knows where, and feeling as if I were dead. How far we have come from the healing virtues of peyote. When searching for online information about Don Erasmo Palma, I came across a documentary film about him entitled El Ladrón de Violines, The Violin Thief, made in 2009. This film opens with a Raramuri elder asking the young filmmakers in Spanish why they want to see that old man. And when he is told that it is because they heard that he composes music, Don Erasmo denies it and insists that the old man is crazy. He then looks straight into the camera and declares, "But if there was no madness in the world, there would be no joy." The same scene is repeated at the end of the film, but this time Don Erasmo goes on to say, "All those who create, who study, get into madness. If you are not crazy, you wouldn't be pointing this camera at me. We're all crazy." He pauses briefly, then adds with a smile, "I invite you to follow me on the path of madness." Emboldened by this invitation, I am compelled to interpret this loop-back effect on the theme of madness as opening a sacred space, resonating with the tonalities of the song that Don Erasmo composed to honor the improbable encounter of an 8-year-old Raramuri boy with a crazy Frenchman, a vocal performative whose affective power intensifies the presence of two human beings who once walked together on the path of creative joy, in the footsteps of the next 7 generations.